Welcome to the Commonwealth Policy Center's Candidate Forum. I'm Richard Nelson, founder and executive director of the Commonwealth Policy Center. There are 12 Republican candidates vying for the nomination to run for governor against Andy Beshear. His approval ratings are very high, and several top-tier candidates already hold statewide office, including Commissioner of Agriculture Ryan Quarles. Ryan is joining us today to tell us a little bit about himself and his candidacy, why he's running, and what he would do if he were elected governor. Commissioner Quarles, welcome to CPC's Candidate Forum.
Thank you for having me today.
So, Commissioner Quarles, tell us why you are running for governor of Kentucky. You were one of the first candidates to announce their candidacy. You've garnered hundreds of endorsements from local officials and state officials across the Commonwealth. What led you to a position where you thought you were the guy to run against Andy Beshear?
Well, running for governor is a decision that I made not lightly. I think that it's so important that Kentucky have an executive leader that's going to bring our state together. There's a lot of divisiveness in Frankfort. There's a lot of missed opportunities, especially when economic development projects do not go through that help out particularly rural Kentucky. And I also think that we need a governor that's more so focused on sharing the credit and working together than taking the credit for everything. The following reasons are why I decided to run for governor. Number one, Andy Beshear violated our constitutional rights during the COVID shutdowns. He sent state troopers to churches, violating our freedoms, rights, and liberties as Americans on Easter Sunday a few years ago. He shut down our economy, destroying countless Kentucky proud family-owned businesses like restaurants. He shut down Main Street, Kentucky, but let the big box stores stay open. So it was a big economic damage during the COVID shutdowns, particularly when he refused to work with my office as well. I actually took the governor to court and successfully beat him in the courtroom and kept over 500 family-owned businesses open during the COVID lockdowns. And another thing that he did is that he kept our kids out of the schools longer than necessary, which has resulted in plummeting test scores. And for those reasons, plus the fact that this governor has no intention whatsoever with working with both parties, which is illustrated with over 90 vetoes in less than 4 years, that this is an individual, along with his dad, who have run Kentucky for 24 years. And what's happened during those 24 years? Our pensions have been weakened. Our education system really hasn't improved a whole lot. And our rankings as a state have really remained low in the areas that we should be high in and high in the areas that we should be low in. And now they're asking for 4 more years. And so I'm running for governor to, number one, unite our state together. Number two, have some bold ideas to implement that goes beyond just kicking the can in Frankfort. And number three, I want to be that visionary leader that's doing this not because my dad was governor, not because it's a stepping stone to Washington, D.C., but because I truly think that God has placed me in a position in my life to serve as a public servant and let Kentucky become the best version of itself. And that's why I'm running for governor.
Very good. The next question you've already answered is, what was your biggest criticism of Governor Beshear? As you shared many that people across the Commonwealth have seen and agree with, but with those criticisms in mind, how do you explain the governor's high approval ratings? Various polls reveal that he is upwards of the 50th percentile and in the low 60s as far as his overall approval.
Well, it kind of reminds me of Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter was a likable president, but not a strong executive leader. And so I think for a lot of Kentuckians, they don't personally dislike the governor. They just need to be reminded about the missed opportunities we had, whether it's during COVID lockdowns, whether it's with his views not being in touch with the vast majority of Kentuckians, or in my experience as Commissioner of Agriculture, where he blundered an opportunity to bring a large-scale meat processing plant to our state. We could have been the Omaha Steaks of this side of Mississippi using our Kentucky Proud logo. And so, look, elections are dynamic. A poll is just a static temperature check of what a selected few, and you don't know the methodology behind some of these polls. But I can tell you this, there is an undercurrent across Kentucky for fresh new leadership. And I see it and hear about it every single day as I travel the 120 counties of the Commonwealth. There's an eagerness for somebody new. They want someone besides a family dynasty in office, and they want somebody that they know is going to care about all of Kentucky and not just a few organizations or constituencies that don't represent the vast majority of Kentuckians.
There are 11 other candidates on the Republican ticket in the primary. How do you distinguish yourself from the other candidates?
Well, first off, with 12 people in the race, I'm focused on nobody's race but my own. I believe in Ronald Reagan's 11th commandment, that I'm not going to speak illy about another a friend really that's in the primary. And they're my friends now. They're going to be my friends after the primary. And so first off, I'm going to be running a positive race through May 16th. But there are a few things that I believe distinguish my candidacy. Number one is that I have almost 8 years of running the largest executive branch agency in Kentucky, second only to the governor's office. I've run it scandal-free. We've cut the budget 5 times. We've done more with less at the Department of Agriculture. And so I have the experience as a chief executive at the Department of Agriculture. And if we can replicate what we've accomplished at the KDA to the rest of state government, I think that our track record speaks for itself. Another distinguishment is I'm a former legislator. I spent 5 years in the Kentucky General Assembly as a Republican and never spent a single day in the majority party. And so I have a great working relationship and understanding of the legislative process. I want to work with our legislators, both parties, the supermajorities as well, to get things done. Right now, there's so much tension between the governor's office and the legislative branch that the legislators really view the governor as irrelevant in the policymaking process here in Kentucky. And I know that many members of leadership would echo that exact phrase. And so I want to work with our General Assembly. It's been a long time since Kentucky has had stability in Frankfort between the governor's office and the legislative branch. And just think about what we can accomplish. Imagine the day where the governor and our legislative leaders can sit down and say, this is where we want Kentucky to go, and not sue each other constantly in the courtroom. And that's another distinguishment between the governor and myself. I have a track record of being a consensus builder. That's my background. That's my leadership style, of bringing people together. I do it every day at the Department of Agriculture as well. And then a final distinguishment is I'm so proud that we are known as the grassroots race, the grassroots candidate in this crowded primary, that we have garnished the endorsements of over 230 plus elected Republicans, including over 1/4 of our judge executives, 25 plus members of the Kentucky General Assembly, well over 100 magistrates and counting across Kentucky, that we are the grassroots candidate. And I think in a crowded field with a low voter turnout, that the candidate that has the best and broadest base, it has the most discipline and the most work ethic, is going to win. And let's not forget that the farmers and agriculture community across Kentucky, they're locked in. They're going to stick with me. And I feel that my base, it gives me an advantage in this primary. And so I'm looking forward to the next 5.5 weeks. We're working hard every day. I'm telling people that I'm visiting every single county twice and every Dollar General store once. So we're going to be traveling to a county near you in the near future.
Very good. Ryan, you had mentioned that you feel that you were called to run for office. Of course, Governor Beshear probably feels called to run for office as well. He often quotes biblical passages. He talks about his Christian faith. I've got 2 questions here. How do you distinguish your faith and your values from his? And how do the voters determine if there are 2 candidates who feel they are called by God as to who they should vote for? Tell us also how your faith influences your policy positions and how your faith speaks to your calling.
Well, I'm a born again Christian. I'm a follower of Christ. It's something that I take very seriously. And I will never question the authenticity of another person's faith. That's not my job. And especially as a Christian, it's not my job to judge somebody else. So I'm not going to comment on anybody else's faith. But I will say this, that for me, um, being a regular church member at Southland Christian Church in Georgetown, Kentucky, on a church that's literally built on a farm that my brother and I farmed for 15 years, it's part of who I am now. It's my identity. And every Sunday I spend time reflecting and very appreciative of the opportunities that have become easier for me because I've gotten the burdens of worrying a lot, anxiety. I just left them at the foot of the cross. And so I'm proud to be a follower of Christ, and that when I make decisions, oftentimes that's part of my decision-making process. And I'll give you an example. I'm a firm believer in religious freedom, that people who have strongly held religious beliefs should not be discriminated against, and they should be protected. And there's a lot of legislation that's been passed over the years, some of which I voted for when I was a legislator, that protects religious freedom for individuals. Another thing that I believe that plays a big role in this is that I believe in forgiveness when it comes to let's take the issue of addiction in Kentucky. We all know somebody that has suffered from the scourge of addiction. And for me, I'm a believer in second chances. Let's give folks the opportunity to go through recovery and rejoin the workforce and get them back on their feet. And so for me, I'm one of these people, one of these leaders where I'm not going to shove my personal views down someone else's throat. But at the same time, I think it's important for people to realize that is a major part of my life, and they need to know that when they go to the voting booth.
Ryan, you talked about second chances, and you've talked about this several times on the campaign trail, and that dovetails into the conversation about prison reform and bail reform. I want to focus on second chances for prisoners, those who've already done their time. Governor Beshear has proposed an effort to get them mainstream back into society by giving them skills, if I recall correctly, by helping them to train and to come out of prison with some kind of skill so that they be employable to get them back into the workforce. I know there are a lot of differences between you and the governor, but on that particular point, retraining and equipping prisoners to acclimate back into society and to become a contributing member of society, is that a good idea?
Well, I think that we need to be promoting the vocational and skilled trades all across Kentucky, a la carte, that we need to get into our middle schools and high schools and promote the ability for Kentuckians to choose trade programs that actually pay quite a bit of money. And so that's something that's going to be a policy initiative that goes beyond people trying to get back on their feet through workforce development projects, but also getting to our school systems and promoting jobs where the starting salary might be $100,000 a year if they know how to weld. When it comes to prisons and jails, we have a major issue in Kentucky. We have over 20,000 people incarcerated. Many deserve to stay behind bars, and I think we need to be tougher on drug dealers, especially those that knowingly sell fentanyl that result in deaths of Kentuckians. I think those folks should be charged with homicide in Kentucky. But at the same time, I think it's important that we work with our county judges and magistrates, especially in those counties that don't have a jail system. There's a lot of tension right now between the state prison system and our counties or so that have jails, many of which are losing money, that we need to have a more comprehensive solution to this. And that does include that for those individuals that have served their time and have completed their sentences, that I think that it's best for society to help train them or give them a job opportunity so that when they are released, they have the ability to go work somewhere. And that includes working with our employers of Kentucky to get them signed up for those that want to do it, to hire folks and give them a second chance. Because what's best for everyone is for those who've been incarcerated to get back out after they serve their time to society, have gainful employment, start paying taxes, and not come back into the prison system.
You have mentioned education. One of the things that the Council on Post-Secondary Education has done is the goal of the 60 by 30 initiative. That's where they're trying to get 60% of Kentuckians with a post-secondary degree or a certificate. Not just four-year college students, but it could be a 2 years associate degree for a community college, could be a 1 year certificate, or even a 6-month certificate. What would you do as governor to encourage our high school graduates to pursue some kind of post-secondary education, whether it's 2 year, 4 year, or a certificate of some kind?
Well, I want to be the education governor. I actually have a doctorate in education. I've taught before in the classroom. I actually served as the student representative on the council for post-secondary education, where I put tuition cap policy in place years ago that prevented universities from having 25 or 20% tuition increases, which occurred back when I was a student. And so I'm proud of my record there. But one thing that we need to do is that somewhere along the line, we got off track. We need to have a dignity of work conversation in Kentucky. What does that mean? Well, somewhere along the line, people told students, if you want to be successful in life, you need to be a doctor or lawyer. And I think that was a misguided ambition, that we need to remind folks that people who come home from work with dirt on their boots or grease on their elbows, those jobs are just as important as those who have white collar jobs downtown. And that's one reason why I think it's important that when a student decides to go down the vocational or trade schools program, where they might have, again, a starting salary of $75,000 or $100,000 a year, we should celebrate that. We should celebrate it like student athletes sign for a college to go play basketball or football or another collegiate sport. We should celebrate that. Additionally, when we build new high schools in Kentucky, we need to make sure that those vocational and trade programs are not separated from the physical structure of high schools, that sometimes a stigma is attached that those sorts of programs are for the kids that may not make good grades. And it couldn't be further from the truth. I like to tell people all the time that folks I graduated high school with 20 years ago, the ones that went straight into vocational and trade school jobs, their house is paid off. They're halfway to retirement or better, and they have a bass boat that's paid off in their front yard. And so we got to somehow get it back to a culture where we respect the dignity of work and value those who work with their hands just as much as those who may have white collar jobs downtown. And since I grew up on a farm, I can attest to this. And some of the smartest people I know never went to college. But I think it's important that with CPE's goal, 60 by 30, that we can achieve that if we promote, we're using KCTCS, our community technical colleges, as part of that counting to get to a higher percentage of Kentuckians that have a post-secondary education degree of some sort, whether that's 4-year, 2-year, a certificate, etc. I would be supportive of that, but we've got to make sure that we treat the vocational and trade school promotions just the same as we do the traditional 4-year college university degrees.
You said that you wanted to be the education governor. Does this mean that you're for school choice or expanding school choice in the Commonwealth?
I believe that when you put competition into the equation, you usually get better outcomes. And I'll give you an example of this. A lot of people misunderstand what a charter school is. And a charter school is still a public run school. It's just operating under a different set of rules and framework. And I think that for school districts that are persistently failing in Kentucky, that it's a disservice to those families and those kids if they enter a school system or school a classroom where they know that for years on years on years that they have bad outcomes. Those people deserve a choice. And so I want to work with the Kentucky General Assembly on that. I'm also the son of an educator. My mom spent 30 years in the classroom in a public school setting, teaching people how to become nurses. I have nothing but tremendous respect for our teachers across the Commonwealth, and they need to be empowered. We need to let our teachers teach. They're trying to do two things. They're trying to teach, and they're trying to raise other people's children. And I think that we need to make it clear that we support our teachers, that they should not be fearful of lawsuits. And I also support discipline reform in the classroom, that for persistent distractions from perhaps a student or two in the classroom, those teachers should have the ability to discipline so that the rest of the students in that classroom don't have their educational opportunities squandered or distracted. And so, if I ever acted up in school, I knew that the punishment at home was a lot worse than what was going to happen at school. And I know a lot of kids don't have that family structure, but we need to empower our teachers. And finally, we need to make sure that parents have a say-so in what their kids are exposed to in the classroom. And so I have a lot of ideas on education, and I want that to be a main focus of the campaign, but also the main focus of policymaking once elected.
To that last point you made, Ryan, about parents knowing what is taught in the classroom, that's related to a portion of Senate Bill 150, which restricted any sex education from being taught in the K-5 public school classroom. It required parental permission of sex ed in grades 6 through 12. Parents had to be notified and to give specific permission to teach kids that there. Is that bill and are those provisions in particular something that you were in favor of?
I think that the main provisions of Senate Bill 50 advanced the ball down the field. Number one, it helped our teachers out, that it did not force those teachers that have deeply held religious beliefs or moral objections from using pronouns, being forced to use that with gender that may not align with how somebody entered this world. Secondly, it also empowered our parents as well. And so I think that this is just the start of a bigger discussion. And I think that what we need is that we need a classroom environment that's comfortable for everybody, that's welcoming for everybody. And I think that the vast majority of Kentuckians don't want people of the opposite sex using the same bathroom in Kentucky, especially when in the sporting situation. I think that boys should not be able to play in girls' sports, period. We've spent decades building up equality in women's sports through Title IX, and it's wrong. It's simply wrong to let boys play against girls, especially when they're competing not just for titles, but they're competing for scholarship opportunities to go to college. And this is an issue I know the governor and I disagree on with, but call me old-fashioned, but I think it's important that we protect women's sports.
A portion of Senate Bill 150 came from House Bill 470, which was known as the Do No Harm Act. It's probably the highest profile piece of legislation this past legislative session. It's one that prevents minors from pursuing hormone therapy, puberty blockers, or transition surgeries before the age of 18. Some are saying that if you favor that legislation, you are canceling and further marginalizing trans-identified kids. Do you agree with that sentiment?
I think that that gender changing surgeries, reassignment surgeries, should be illegal for minors and children in Kentucky. That I'm a red-blooded American. I was taught since I was a kid that that when you turn 18, you become an adult and you can make adult decisions. And that's something that I think is in line with this legislation, that a lot of these gender reassignment surgeries are irreversible. They result in sterilization. And I know that during the testimony of this bill, which was very emotional for a lot of people, that there are people that went through this as children that later regret it in life. And so I think that we need to protect our children, and that those are decisions that should be made by adults.
The state legislature passed a bill to allow medical marijuana. This bill's been debated for years in the legislature, and it finally got passed into law. I know that you came out in favor of medical marijuana, but do you have any concerns of the downsides, that this might be a pretense for those who want to use it for recreational purposes?
I am against the legalization of recreational marijuana, period. The reason I came out for a narrow exception, narrow framework, was for those who are unfortunately suffering from end-of-life issues, chronic pain, cancer victims, etc. That a lot of Kentuckians I know are self-medicating right now. We need to give them a legal framework, and so that they can have the assurance that what they may be self-medicating with, they know exactly what they're doing, what products they're buying. Number one is that I want to work with law enforcement to make sure we get it right. This should not be a camel's nose underneath the tent for recreational marijuana. Secondly, I've run the state hemp program for the past 8 years. I've got a strong track record of working with law enforcement. They trust me to get it done right, and I want to do that. Number three is that if we're going to treat this as medicine, again, medicinal cannabis, let's treat it like medicine. This should be between a doctor and the patient, and it should be prescribed like other drugs. This is not a dispensary situation where you go down to your local dispensary because you stubbed your toe. This should be about medicine for people who are suffering from a very narrow list of end-of-life issues. Number three is that let's treat it like medicine. Don't tax it. There's a lot of advocates out there saying, open the door and let's tax it. Well, why would you want to tax medicine for people that may be relying upon this, especially right now, illegally by bringing it in from other states for self-medication purposes? And lastly, as the Commissioner of Agriculture now, if we're going to allow these products, let's make it Kentucky grown. Let's let Kentucky farmers benefit from this. And so I do support a narrow exemption from this. My mother passed away 10 years ago last week after a courageous fight with ovarian cancer. She spent 7 years in nonstop chemotherapy and radiation treatments. She never asked for cannabis, but I know that a lot of people out there are already doing this, self-medicating. So why not give them a safe, very narrowly focused framework to allow those end-of-life situations to have this option for medical benefit?
The state legislature also passed a bill to create a framework for sports gambling. Critics, including Commonwealth Policy Center and myself, are concerned about what this does to kids, especially teenagers who have access to digital devices and might be prone to gambling on the various games that they're tuned into. Do you have a concern that kids might be drawn into gambling on their smartphones or iPads?
Yeah, and yes, because it's already happening. Right now, even before the legislation was passed, you can go on an iPhone, download a VPN, and get on companies that are not located in Kentucky, some of which are located in international terminals, and make bets right now on your phone. So the legislation that was passed set up a fund to help deal with addiction issues and problematic gambling issues. The fact of the matter is it's already happening. And so I believe that all forms of illegal gambling should be regulated. And so I think the General Assembly put some frameworks up and some bumper rails up to at least deal with the illegal gaming that's occurring in Kentucky.
Ryan, we're just about out of time. So what would you do as far as if you were elected governor, what would be one of the first things that you would do?
We don't have enough time to go over everything that's going to happen on the first day. But number one, we want to cut the regulatory burden in Kentucky. Right now, I hear from business owners and employers all across Kentucky that they can't even get phone calls returned from Frankfurt. We want to do what we did at the Department of Agriculture for the rest of the state government, meaning we're going to be a customer service-based agency. We're here to work on behalf of Kentuckians, not the other way around. That we want to unleash energy independence in Kentucky, that we shouldn't be forced to be dependent upon foreign countries for our fuel and economic freedom. I also want to stand up and support our men and women in law enforcement. I believe in law and order, and so I'm going to be a governor that's going to support, fund our men and women in law enforcement as well. I also want to make sure that we do not have mandatory COVID vaccine mandates in Kentucky, especially in our school systems. The CDC left that up to the individual states, and I'll sign an executive order that says no mandatory COVID vaccines, especially in our school systems. I also think that it's important that we have a governor that's going to be pro Second Amendment. Also, I'm pro-life. I'm so thrilled to be endorsed by Kentucky Right to Life, but I want to leave an effort starting on day one to help reform our adoption and foster care system across Kentucky. There's over 8,000 kids looking for a forever home right now, and it's a really frustrating process. It's an expensive process, and so we want to lead that conversation to help make it easier to adopt and become a foster parent in Kentucky as well. And there's so many other things that we're going to address on day one. And that includes taking down the Andy Beshear security fence they put up around the mansion. The mansion should be used as a tool to help Kentucky become a better place. I want to reopen it to the public. I think it's a symbolic gesture. I also think that we should get our school kids in there and bring them back to discover how the branches of government work in Frankfurt, and also be aggressive on international trade. That's something I have somewhat of a specialty and a niche in, and that's something that I think that we can take Kentucky to all corners of the world to help promote what really makes us a unique state in the United States of America.
Ryan, you kind of gave a pitch to voters right there, but I'll give you another 30 seconds or so as we close out this segment. Tell voters, in particular, why Republican voters should vote for you on May the 16th.
Well, we need to nominate a Republican who has the best chances of beating Andy Beshear. Governor Beshear, as you alluded to before, it's going to be a tough race. There's only 3 gubernatorial races in the country this year. This will be the most high-profile race in America, and we need to nominate somebody that we know that can go the entire distance. This is last time I ran, I won 117 of 120 counties. I won by 20 points both in 2015 and 2019. I feel like I've got the track record and experience to take on Andy Beshear this fall. And so I would humbly ask for the support and vote for your viewers on May 16th. If they'd like to learn more, especially our Bold Ideas plan, which will release a bold idea that's going to help strengthen Kentucky every week, check out our website at ryanquarles.com. And I'll leave you with this. I grew up on a farm. I work hard. Let's elect somebody who has some common sense in their head and some dirt on their boots as governor of Kentucky.
Very good. Commissioner Quarles, thank you so much for joining us here at the Commonwealth Policy Center, and best wishes to you on the campaign trail.